Greetings. I'm Darrow Miller and want to take a few minutes and introduce myself to you. I'm the co-founder of the DNA, but probably the more important things that you need to know. I've been a follower of Christ since I was 13 years old. I'm married to the bride of my youth. Her name is Marilyn. We've been married for 46 years and we have 4 children and 14 grandchildren and 1 more on the way. Aside from my coming to Christ and marrying my bride Marilyn, the 2 most important events that affected my life occurred in my late teens and early 20s. When I was in college, there was a group of 11 university students from Southern California and Arizona that went to Mexico City, and we spent 6 weeks working in an orphanage. I had never seen poverty before, and I remember as the train pulled into Mexico City, I saw people living in houses literally made out of trash. And in my culture, young men are taught not to cry. Women cry, men don't cry. And as I looked out the window of that train, I began to weep. It's like you had taken me to another planet. I'd never seen anything like this in my life, and my heart was broken for the poor. And I remember at that moment a conviction inside of me, and I said, I can't walk away from this. I want to see less poverty in the world when I die than there is today. Couldn't have told you what that meant, but that was one of those turning points in my life. The second event occurred a number of years later. I'm married now. My wife and I are hitchhiking around Europe, and we ended up in a Swiss farm village called Waymo at a place called L'Abri Fellowship with Francis and Ida Schaefer. I remember one night we were having dinner with Debbie and Udo Mittelman. Udo's a German lawyer. It was the winter time. We were sitting around with a group of 10 people in this 400-year-old Swiss chalet. There were candles on the table, dried cut flowers from the field, classical music playing in the background, and gently outside this window of this old chalet, the snow was falling. Wonderful, wonderful evening. And Udo turned to me and he said, you know, Darrow, Christianity's true, even if you don't believe it. And I thought for a moment and I said to myself, I've been taught all my life as a Christian that Christianity is true because I believe it. And here is somebody telling me it's true even if I don't believe it. And I said, what did you say? And he said, Christianity is true even if you don't believe it. And this produced a crisis of faith for me. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. What is this man trying to say to me? And I finally realized what he was saying. He was saying that Christianity is true even if no one in the world believes. It has nothing to do with my belief or your belief. Christianity is true because God exists. And it's true to what is real. And I realized in that moment that I had a born-again heart, but my mind was not born again. I'd grown up in the United States. I was taught to think like a secular materialist. An atheist says there is no God, therefore there is no truth, therefore whatever you believe is what's true. If you believe in Mohammed, that's what's true for you. If you believe in Buddha, that's what's true for you. If you believe in Jesus, that's what's true for you. And I had realized that I had a born-again heart and a pagan mind. And I needed to have my mind born again. When When I was in my early 30s, I had the opportunity to go to work for an international relief and development organization called Food for the Hungry. I had been significantly influenced as a young Christian by Ron Sider's book, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, and this piggybacked on my broken heart for the poor. And I thought that people were poor because they lacked resources, and the way to solve the problems of hunger and poverty was to provide outside resources. As I began traveling with Food for the Hungry, I began to be uncomfortable with this paradigm, this way of seeing poverty. I remember visiting Haiti on one of my first trips, and at that point there were 1,000 relief and development organizations and mission organizations working in Haiti, and they were pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into Haiti every year, and yet Haiti was destitute. And I couldn't understand, with all these organizations and all this money, why the country was as poor as it was. Then I went over to the Dominican Republic, to a community where Food for the Hungry was working, the community of Constanza. And Constanza was located in a beautiful, what you would call, if you were in Europe, a beautiful alpine valley. There was no snow, but there were mountains, a fertile valley with a river running through it, and yet the people were poor. But I noticed on the side of the hill overlooking the valley, there were some what we would call middle-class homes, and I began to ask people, who live in those homes? And they said, the Japanese. I said, what do you mean, the Japanese? And they explained how the Japanese had come to Constanza at the end of World War II, impoverished, not knowing the language of the culture, and they were looking to start life over again. And in 2 generations, they had prospered. And I began to ask the question, why are the Dominicans so poor, living in paradise? And why are these Japanese who moved here 2 generations ago prospering? I began to ask, and people said, well, the Dominicans are fatalistic. They believe they were born poor and they would die poor. And I said, well, what about the Japanese? They said, the Japanese have a saying, gambare. I said, well, what is gambare? They said, never give up. Always try harder. And in that moment, I remembered what I'd learned at L'Abri about the power and importance of worldview. And I began to ask the question about the cause of poverty. Is it really lack of resources? Or is it lack of a biblical understanding of reality? And these 2 events, the event of my university days of seeing poverty for the first time, and then what I learned at L'Abri from Francis Schaeffer, came together at that moment of my life. And they have shaped the rest of my life and what I teach. I'm looking forward to engaging with you and being part of this process in your lives. I hope you enjoy this time together.